Well, hey, how you doing there? Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world. This is your Sensei Al Bob, and you're coming to us on Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob, our YouTube channel. And I'm your griot, and I'm here to tell you stories. And right off the bat, I want to tell you, don't believe a word I'm saying. Hey there, AI, how you doing, buddy? And so here we are, 2020, the year zero. And it's same as it ever was, right? History is a joke. What is history? His story, right? And the timeline is totally whack, um, because, the things that occurred biblically didn't happen in like long gone years, but actually relatively recent. If you were to take any effort to learn stuff, find out for yourself, don't just believe what CNN tells you. You might find this thing called the mud flood that pretty much wiped out all the Indians in the early 19th century, right? I mean, we were doing a pretty good job of taking them out, but, uh, you know, the fire in Chicago was more like you know, a solar flare or an asteroid or something from space hit it, because it hit Chicago. Chicago when the big fire happened, not the first one when the city was made out of wood, when it was Mrs. McGillicuddy's cow. But the second one, that one, the city was already concrete and steel, and it was taken out like Nagasaki. So there are all kinds of things that should make you go, huh, you know, like, you know, I like this look, the new look of Sensei Al Bob. Uh, so, there are people sending me stuff all the time. So I'm just going to play a little bit of what I had on my. Here's a guy named Cliff High, Critical Thinking. Now, this guy is really very cool in that he's a computer programmer. He's worked on a lot of different things. And one of the things he worked on in the 70s was developing programs to model biological warfare. And he says that this pandemic is a biological weapon, weaponized thing. And if you understand a little biology, basically viruses are dead things. They're just RNA, right? And they are like the scrubbing bubbles of our body. They chew up stuff, right? Now, bacteria is another, that's a living thing, actually has a cell, does grow. But our immune system is pretty amazing. And so most of the virulence we have come from toxins. I know me, I was a pretty healthy guy until I was 40. And then I started, you know, I left my very monk like type of life anyway. So here's Cliff. And so, again, all the stuff I'm going to play you is off of YouTube. This is his channel, Critical Thinking with Cliff High. And this is his most recent one.
About the bioweapon COVID-19 versus geopolitics in the year zero. It's formed from my own observations, perceptions, and extrapolations, and I'm going to be talking about other people's observations and perceptions and extrapolations and where we might differ. I'm going to discuss COVID-19 as though it's a bioweapon and point out how we are now experiencing the difference between static versus dynamic mindsets, which is the belief mindset versus an evidence-based or observational-based mindset. And we see this appearing all around us, and we can make our own observations, filter them through our own perceptions, and do some extrapolations that may aid us in scenario planning as to what might be happening in the future. So let's quickly examine how we get here, and we see that it's possible in early December of last year of 2019, it's possible to have an observation that the Communist Party of China, CCP, has gone batshit. This is episode 3 of Smoking Bats, by the way. And they're reacting really oddly. They're reacting so oddly, it grabs one's attention, even on mainstream media reports of how they're reacting. And this is before there was really much in the way of discussion about any virus or, the potential that it was a zootropic creation that came from eating odd animals. Okay, this is before any of that. The Chinese government, the CCP actually, not the government per se, not the civil service, but the arms of the Communist Party of China went just crazy. And it was really odd because it was not like SARS or anything else. I mean, it was easily tied by December 9th to a disease outbreak. By the 10th of December, it was easily tied to Wuhan. And by the 25th of December, by Christmas, the Chinese Communist Party had made the observation that something nasty had happened. Probably had then been informed by the 25th. They certainly, even in the lower echelons, knew that it was a bioweapon. But I think on the 9th is when Xi Jinping knew that a bioweapon had escaped. It's my observation from the way they reacted that they knew a couple of things. There was a bioweapon, and that there was an existential threat to the Chinese people, and if not to the Chinese people, certainly to the Communist Party of China and any and everybody associated with the release of this bioweapon. I think it was accidental based on how they reacted. They did not appear to have, in my opinion, logistics set up, even at a small level, as though they knew it was going to be released. Okay,
so that's Cliff. Now you should really go see his channel, and because he is really Cliff high critical thinking. Because man, he definitely critical thinks. Right now, his thing is it's a bioweapon. Now it could be. I don't know. Remember when I say.
Censored. America's news outlets no longer provide the truth.
There's somebody else.
Phillip, senior investigative reporter with the Epoch Times, and
I think it's an important thing that we can all do.
Hi.
This is Chris Hedges. This is a Pulitzer Prize. Interesting guy, writer.
Through the war. They had been led by Roosevelt. And we felt that progress was just inevitable. And in the 60s, because the country was doing so well, it seemed okay to open things up. My late husband was at the EEOC. The whole idea was to be more inclusive. And it all sort of began to turn in 1980, or in the 70s with Nixon, in 1980 with Ronald Reagan and Milton Friedman, which gave you this corporate culture. But it's happened so fast that I don't see why it can't still be turned around.
Okay, I mean, it's a good question. It started actually earlier because it started with, you had the collapse of capitalism in the 1930s.
Right.
Roosevelt was a product of the radical movements. The Communist Party, we've kind of erased the Communist Party from American history. I'm not a communist, but they, the whole sit-ins that Martin Luther King used, Ruskin was aware of this. They've been used in the 1920s by the Communist Party, and that's why Paul Robeson or W.E. Du Bois joined the Communist Party, because even the socialists under Debs were hostile. to African Americans, and so Roosevelt astutely understood. I mean, Roosevelt said that his greatest achievement was that he saved capitalism.
Right.
And he understood that if the private sector didn't create jobs for American citizens, given the unemployment,
Good job.
we better create jobs. So he created 12-minute jobs. If elderly people are literally starving or malnourished in their apartments, then we better create Social Security. And the corporate oligarchs made two fatal mistakes. One, they went after the radicals. They recreated the Red Scares of the 1920s in the 1950s.
Right.
And Ellen Schrecker has written two very fine books on this. And you forget how pervasive that purging was. And we're not talking about necessarily communists. We're talking about anybody with a social conscience. So the FBI was going into high schools with a list. This is in Schrecker's book, saying him, her, out. No evidence, nothing. And they're blacklisted. The assault on journalism, that's how I.F. Stone ends up in his basement writing I.F. Stone's Weekly. The assault on Hollywood, on entertainment. So that began to destroy the popular radical movements, which, as Zinn points out, were the forces that opened up our democracy. We have a closed system. Every time I hear about the deification of the founding fathers, I just want to fall over. These people were racist. They supported the genocide. I mean, read what they wrote about eradicating the Indians. Washington was the wealthiest man in the United States. They were misogynists. On and on and on. And we paid for it with blood. We had the bloodiest labor wars of any industrialized country. So they went after the radical movements, then they went after the liberal class. And I wrote a book on it called Death of the Liberal Class, where, and as Chomsky points out, I told Noam for Death of the Liberal Class, everything I learned about the liberal class, I learned from Noam Chomsky, so I should have put by Chris Edges and Noam Chomsky, except I didn't get his permission to do it. As Chomsky points out, the liberal class was never designed to be the political left. It was designed to be the safety valve, what Karl Popper writes about in the Enemies of the Open Society. It was designed to ameliorate, to adjust the system the way Roosevelt did. And so they eviscerated the liberal establishment, and then we got the great traitor of liberalism, Bill Clinton, who really sold American people down the river. And we can just tick it off. NAFTA, the greatest betrayal of working men and women since the Taft-Hartley Act. Deregulating the FCC so these troglodytes from Clear Channel and Fox News can consolidate control. We have about 6 corporations or 5 control 90% of what people listen to. And it's indoctrinated crap. Talk about it's fake news. I mean, real fake news. He passes the 94 Omnibus Crime Bill, so the prison population explodes from 700,000. He destroys Glass-Steagall. He destroys welfare. And 70% of the original recipients in the old welfare program were children. And every time I heard Hillary Clinton talk about her concern for mothers. So, and Obama wasn't any better, but that's another story. So that we created this. It was a gradual process, and in that process, we deindustrialized. So, as Charles Mayer, the Harvard historian, says, by the 1970s, we had shifted from an empire of production to an empire of consumption, meaning that we were borrowing to maintain both a lifestyle and a military we could no longer afford, and now we're paying for it. And that's a long answer. Go ahead.
Thank you.
I agree with every word that you spoke.
So there you go. There's that
I want
guy.
to pick up with what that lady said.
And so, it's kind of right in our face, There's no ignoring it, It's kind of just what it is. Look at this guy. So that was pros.
You might get some crumbs off the tables of the Bezoses or the Bloombergs of the world, but let's be clear. They want you to die. They want you to work, and if you can't work, they want you to die. And that is the reality in this country right now. We have a psychopath, sociopath as president. We have a spineless opposition movement that can't even call itself opposition. And we have a dire crisis where 10 million people have applied for unemployment in the last 2 weeks, where more than 3 million people are going to be losing their health care because it is tied to their employment. And we have an opposition that refuses to fight tooth and nail for health care for all, free on point of service.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jeremy. Maybe I can just give you also my perspective from Europe, because I think for the US audience, perhaps they cannot even imagine, okay, the situation is not good in Europe, it depends on different countries, but I think they cannot even imagine that in some of these countries, I'm currently in Austria, I come from Croatia, which was part of socialist Yugoslavia, we had a healthcare system, we still have a more or less functioning healthcare system, which was free, which was public, which was universal for all the people. And all these governments, most of them introduced measures on time, like I'm in self-isolation already for 20 days. This country here in Vienna introduced banning of public events already 2 weeks ago. You can see that governments are reacting differently. So when we from Europe look at the United States, we are really horrified and we are surprised. And it also brings me to something what I guess you remember when this Iranian minister 1 month ago or something mentioned that coronavirus is a democratic virus. In the sense that it's not discriminating. It hits the rich, it hits the political leaders, and also the poor. And I think this is ideology at its purest, because what you just described, and what I can also tell here in Vienna, I mean the situation.
So I'm just flipping through what I've been watching. Here's Richie from Boston. This guy's
obviously, as usual, caused by a virus or a bacteria of some sort.
Oops. Richie really he's driving across America, seeing where it is.
When I had chemo, radiation, parasite, bacteria, fungus tried to eat into that dead tissue, they were killed because they were poisoned to death from that tissue. So what's all this contagious bullcrap about virus? That's like saying laundry soap is contagious. Well, it's in every home, and everybody uses it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or between 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Most housewives and people do their laundry. So it must be contagious because it's always happening about the same time. That's when colds and flus happen. They happen seasonally for a reason. There are 300,000 varieties of virus. Each one of them takes just a little particle of a cell at a time and disassembles it. And the pharmaceutical industry says, see, it dissolves the cell. No, it's dissolving a specific tissue in that cell, so specific that it can never damage the integrity of that cell. Unless you have many viruses happening at one time because of a highly toxic polluted cell from industrial pollution. And it's usually from the medical profession that happens. But usually 1, 2 viruses are occurring all at one time, only once in a lot of people. So, one person gets, the flu, then the next person gets the flu, and Joe Blow's got it, and all of a sudden, all these people start cropping up, and they say it's contagious. That's like saying the first rooster that starts crowing toward the sun is contagious to all the other roosters, because they get up and crow too, Viruses are not contagious. AIDS is not contagious. It's a man-made virus. It's the lymphonomic virus of a sheep, and it's the leukemic virus of a bovine spliced together. Man-made. Injected into our population by our dear great military government as biochemical warfare experimentation. And do you know who their undesirables were they allowed to do it on? NSA are allowed to do it on? Undesirables. And you know who the undesirables were? Homosexuals. So homosexuals in New York, Houston, Los Angeles, and San Francisco were the target. How did they target them? Well, if you remember in the 70s, all through the 80s, the main people getting hepatitis were homosexuals because of their intense drug use. So they were given it in the hepatitis B vaccine, and they were strategically put in those cities. 10% of the people were not homosexual. That's why 10% of the population was not homosexual who got it in those cities. But it only happened in those cities. And then when the government got caught, it started putting them out in other cities, so they got it all over. And then they put it in the smallpox vaccine in Africa. Why would British government?
It's right in our face. It can't be hidden any longer. This is year zero. And so they're going to go pretty quick. Let's see. Do. Let's go.
It's 3:30 in the afternoon. I've talked to several patriots in this very small town in Wyoming. And you know what's amazing?
This is Jimmy
All
from
of them are
Boston.
They understand
Richie from Boston.
What's going on as far as this, that, and the other thing. But if what was unfolding in front of us right now was a book, everyone's on a different page. Except for this fella. This fella works for the Defense Department, and he's been consistently sending me information along with his credentials, along with information that he's getting across his desk. Because he's actually a patriot who doesn't have his head shoved in his ass. He's paying attention. Let's take a look at the very first line of this. This comes from at the direction of U.S. Northern Command. Now, all of us first learned that word from Operation Jade Helm. It's the first time we had heard of U.S. Northern Command. And then here it is, March 28th,
People set up to have martial law in
mobilizing
America.
Task Force 42nd, formed by the Military Police Command. 263rd Army Air and Missile Defense Command Headquarters. Task Force 76, formed by the 76th Operational Response Command. 377th Theater Sustainment Command Headquarters, New Orleans. 4th Expeditionary Sustainment. 505th Military Intelligence Brigade. These are the units previously announced. Now, let's not forget that the governor completely activated 10,500 so far. I mean, that was before they announced 1 million more, but 10,500 infantry troops. Now, infantry, like I have explained to you, myself, Mike Decker, we were.
Also today, Governor Brian Abbott issued another executive order.
Shut up with this gay people everywhere. Ugh, like I like to shoot this guy out of a cannon. Sorry about that. At any rate, so instead of
Come on, Richie.
Volunteers,
he is from South Boston,
or medics, they've deployed infantry soldiers, which myself, Mike, and many others were. 11 Bravo, Fort Benning, Georgia, Sand Hill. They teach you how to carry a lot of weight, walk, and shoot. That's what infantry does. Period. That's what I did. Period. So let's get back to this email from the fellow that works for the Defense Department and the paperwork that he sent me right here.
What Jimmy is,
he said, if I were an
Richie's going on, we're being invaded by our own military soon.
If you want the short answer. But he tells you all this information, blah, blah, blah. Why use these non-medical units? And he explains, but then he says, if you want the long story short, because I asked him that, here it is. Mobilization for an invasion. Now, isn't that crazy? Because I've already said that, and here's somebody who does this for his job. And I didn't even see this. Jade Helm, U.S. Northern Command. So they practiced for this, and we knew this, period. And you know how I know about Jade Helm? Well, this is what I was doing while Jade Helm was going on, if you recall, if you were around. You see this little gem from a long time ago? You see that? Wait till you see what I look like. And nobody watched it. Nobody cared. With 3 But during Jade Helm, I was out in the area Jade Helm was being held, and I was trying to get any information I possibly could, and I was sending it back to Professor Doom. Sadly, Professor Doom turned out to be a scumbag, and he disappeared, but whatever. I was still on it. Because I've always been on this. And now, here we see it again. Here's U.S. Northern Command. This is the response to COVID-19, which is complete and total, utter bullshit. And here's Jade Helm. You see that? And long story short, he's come up with the same exact answer that I already saw with my own 2 eyes, because it's obvious, because there is no pandemic. COVID-19 is nothing. And is that my opinion? Nope. It's never been my opinion. I formed my opinion by talking to medical experts and then simply repeated it to you. Medical people in Boston, medical people all over the United States, and all over the world have drawn the same conclusion that COVID-19 is a mild cold. And to go one step further with that, Dr. Kaufman, MD from MIT, sent me this last night. You see this right here? This is from Dr. Andrew Kaufman, MD. Yes, he's a psychologist, but I don't know if you don't understand this or not. MIT, I mean, those are some of the best and brightest in the world. That's the deal. I don't dig the fact that they've got Darwin carved on the side of one of the buildings, but you know, you get what you pay for.
I know exactly where that is.
I know you do. I do too. I've been there. I've been there a couple of times. All right, let me pull up another article. Are you done with this one?
I think we covered it well, but I did want to say one more thing about Italy, because on your last episode, I took the mortality or the death statistics from China and I extrapolated that to the U.S. population, and it would have amounted to 15,000 total deaths. So I did the same thing with the Italian numbers from that paper. I took the total number of deaths per population and extrapolated to the U.S., and it only amounted to 9,000 deaths.
Wow, that's crazy. Check out this comment right here, because this is becoming a very common email. My landlord says we have to have vaccine in order to live there. The vaccine is everything. It's
Absolutely.
You sent me several. Maybe that's a good segue. Do you mind if I pull up the?
No, absolutely. I wanted to talk about that, and I want to make sure that I give your viewers some guidance about how to protect themselves from some of these things. So that includes the testing, the vaccine, and possible seasonal illness. But I think, this is a very key point, and I want to tell everyone that your landlord has absolutely zero authority to make any decisions or demands about your personal health and your body. In reality, the government doesn't have that right either, but it's going to be a little bit tougher battle with the government. But no one is going to back up any landlord making demands like that.
I agree. I totally agree. We're in some murky waters, because I know people that are planning on filing paperwork, and yourself included. But the one problem with this entire thing is an enormous anti-constitutional, anti-humanity, criminal event that's going right now. This is just a massive looting, and then they're going to try to force a whole new paradigm on people. They want us to live on an earth where you don't actually come in contact with other people for fear of a mild flu that's been around for a long time, that every single solitary person in the medical field I've talked to have no fear of. You might feel a little uncomfortable.
Right.
You might get a runny nose. This is amazing, man. This is totally amazing. And you being here may possibly be the linchpin that sets somebody off. That's why we need as many people that are actually real educated citizens in this field that have the courage to stand up. And you have, Doctor. No matter what happens, when the smoke clears, in my opinion, my humble opinion, you've done your part.
Well, so, I really appreciate that. It means so much.
I said that to anyone, FYI. So I'm serious, brother. So
Thank you. For me, it's like just something I have to do. And, that's all there is to it.
I agree. All right, I'm going to pull up the COVID-19, or do you want the false positive for?
You're listening to the Corbett Report. CorbettReport.com.
Whoops. Turn my phone off. Anyway. So, Alibaba, Josh, Tony. So here we are in, year zero. I've been going on for about 11 months about, the window of opportunity, and we do because we're being forced, to not be distracted, to focus like a laser on what's going on. Now I'm out. I mean, I'm as social. There's nobody around me, except squirrels. So I'm as all by myself as it could be. But I'm in this very squirrely place where there are 4 states within 50 miles of me, right? And actually, I have to go at least 40 miles to one of 2 towns to make a phone call, right? Hey, Josh, Mr. Eden, do you really believe that there are 7 billion people on the planet? Again, I have no idea. I haven't counted them. And I've traveled all around the world, and mostly in the 70s and 80s. And then the 90s, I was, Mr. Scholar in universities here in the United States. And but I traveled a great deal in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and basically there were a lot of people, but no more than you travel across America, a lot of vacant space. Really, New York City, one of our largest cities, only has 7 million people in it. Massive metropolitan area. So, the real deal is how we treat each other. The real deal is that we have to. This is a great gift because the powers that be are Piscean psychopaths, right? And we're year zero of the Aquarian age, right? And my studying things for a good 30 years, I saw a lot of stuff that showed that history isn't what we're told, and all the, it's like our sense of who we are is more like out of a comic book. To truly understand the theologic texts, the Torah, the old, the Bible, and the Bhagavad Gita, all the different holy books. They're all codes, right? They aren't, verbatim of anything. They are metaphors that these religions that are business plans, basically over 600 years, rewrote, and they had illiterate monkeys on typewriters doing this. But no matter how they changed it, the code stayed the same. It's just like DNA. And so, there are real interesting things. So that's why we're in year zero, because first of all, they're, again, going to try, as Jimmy Ritchie from Boston, and he's really hot on this, and so is Max of the Crow House and a number of others, that they're trying to play us, right? Trying to bring on the new world order and get rid of money and have electronic monetary transfer. Because money is so dirty. Like, I bought some zinc the other day because it was real trade, big bottle, 200 zinc tablets for $2.95, and so I said, "Oh yeah." So all I had was my 20, and I had that stuck in my wallet. It had been there for the last 4 or 5 months. It's my emergency 20. Well, that's okay. So I did it, and the lady paid me in dollar bills. So she gave me 16, 17 dollar bills. Not a 10 to 5 and a few ones, but dollar bills. And I'm gonna have to phone myself on somebody else. But and that's the only money I have left. Again, if anybody wants to put anything in my PayPal, which is at the dude awake 42 at Gmail, that would be good. But it's okay. I live out here, and spring is coming. I sat around the deep green, just looking at one tree, and it was just the bud hadn't opened, and over the afternoon it went from just being a little gray, almost just a little green thing, to being a green thing with a little flower coming out of it. Right, that happened this afternoon on this one tree, on this one limb, on this one bud, and I looked at it for a good 6 hours. I was doing other stuff, but I would stop and look at it, right? Because it's right on my porch. It's like not hard. It's like right there. So I could do, and then, oh, there it is. Look, oh, look, it's gotten bigger. How to treat people well if you can't come close to them. Well, because our hearts, the energetic dynamic of our heart is nonlinear, so it can go out into the cosmos. So you can touch people's hearts without having. I mean, one reason why they're trying to, have us stay away from each other is because they don't want people. Basically, why China unleashed this. If you look at Cliff Hyde, why it unleashed this, because they were at a point. The virus they were worrying about, what the CCP was worrying about, was Hong Kong. As their population got more middle class, they're going to want a thing called freedom, right? Now, Americans are such sheep, and the powers that shouldn't be think they can scam them. Well, they scammed them with, the Korean War and the Vietnam War and Desert Storm and 9/11 and 08, and these are all scams, and we are each time getting more and more fleeced with blood and treasure, and so we have to realize that the blood and treasure isn't what's worth. What is worth, what has value, is our free-willed soul of love's co-creation. And Tony, you bring up, how do we treat people well if we can't come close to them? We have to develop an alternative aesthetic. I've experienced in the 70s, that was a really hard time. The oil embargo, I mean, that was a flip the switch on the economic system, and then Nixon, and then Watergate, and then Jimmy Carter, and then Ronald Reagan, and then George H., and then Bill Clinton, who is the great devastator of our country. Chris Hedges went through it earlier part of this video, and so we have to come to grips first with ourselves. How do we have to treat ourselves? So we have to, the ideal will eventually overcome completely the sense of loneliness and abandonment all the separate ones experience. And what is that? God goes with all of us wherever we go. And God is the connective tissue from my heart to your heart, Tony. and from your heart to Eden's heart, right? And that's how that is, right? It's the miracle of love's co-creation, and we have to build around it a frame of aesthetics. We have to have an alternative aesthetics to materialism, to value of the Dreckle. That's not what's important. What's important is love's co-creation. That's what's important, right? And those videos I showed you were just a reflection of people's anxieties and fears and strengths and heroic actions. Richie, you could get down on Richie for a lot of things. He's not what you would call politically correct, but that's okay. His heart is in the right place. He's driving across America, talking to people, telling us what he's seeing, right? He's basically seeing that no one's sick, And what I can see from my very, very rural, I'm beyond rural, I'm out in the middle of the woods. But when I drive that 40 miles, so I drive 40 miles to another, to go over to Boone, North Carolina. And that's a college town. All those kids are gone. So all those restaurants and bars and everything that serves the kids closed up, right? But the supermarket's open, the this is open, the that's open. And then the other way, you go to Johnson City, Tennessee. That's a bigger town by maybe, when the kids aren't in Boone, maybe that population is 30,000. When the kids aren't in Johnson City, populations maybe 70,000, right? But both those kids are twice the population. Mountain dwellers come out and work their land. Yep, exactly. That's what I've been doing. Did you know tonight is a very magical night? The black waning crescent. Oh, yes. It's gotten a little cloudy, so I can't see it. I'm in the middle of a forest, but I knew that was happening. And so, Eden, can you fill us in on the historical, theologic, and what's the right word? The mystery schools go deep into astrology, astronomy. It's like the 4th of July. You know what the 4th of July is? It's when the dogs are. The Sirius star is the brightest. And the United States was under, and that's, all the guys who are Illuminati Masons are all, gaga for the dog star. So we have a great, I've been speaking of this window of opportunity. We're at a window of opportunity because the 7th was, I went through the 60s. I'm born in the 1950. I remember the 50s very well. And that was a really hard time. When Chris was talking about them, going after just, people of social conscience, they were just taking them out one after the other. And in the 70s, the same thing happened economically. I mean, it crushed the small businessman, right? And that's why close to 2 million apartments went feral. The landlords just walked away. They couldn't afford the oil to heat the place, and so they walked away. Even though the city was subsidizing the rent of people who had, rent subsidies, the landlords couldn't pay the oil. The oil used to cost them $300 or $400 a winter, and then it jumped up to $5,000, and they just walked away. So and that's what brought on the crime and the drugs, and those were brought in by what really created crime in the inner cities was urban renewal. When they tore down big chunks of neighborhoods and put highways in them that separated the people. Right now, we're having a national urban renewal of sticking everybody in their house. And they're making laws where you can't. I had a friend of mine who was walking around on her own land, and a drone came over, and speaker said, "Lady, you have to get in your house." She's way out in the middle of nowhere. It was down in Florida or Louisiana, and those places are out of it too. Oh. Under the moonlight. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? It just cut out. Yeah, I get like edited. uh, so, so I want to talk about the alternative aesthetic that's based on love's co-creation, right? And in the 70s, when I was in New York, and why I kept moving around New York City and going all over the world was I could, and it was I took advantage of things like Freddie Laker. You could fly from New York City, from Kennedy to Heathrow for $60, right? And it was really amazing. They had their little ticket thing on in the ground floor of the Pan Am building, and right where Park Avenue runs through the Pan Am building, and there's also Grand Central Station, and so it was right there. You went in there, and before 2 o'clock, you could, from 12 midnight to 2 o'clock, you could buy. Maybe even they came. You got on the airplane around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, you went down to the Pan Am building around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You got on a bus. They drove you from the Pan Am building to Kennedy onto the tarmac. You didn't go into any. They didn't have a gate. They had the plane on the tarmac. The bus went there. They had steps. You went up there. You got on board the airplane, right? And it was quite nice, because they opened up the lounge in their office at about 4, and they gave you cocktails, right? You get on the bus, you had your cocktail in a plastic cup, you got on the bus, and you got on the airplane, and it was all one. It wasn't first class, second class, third class, fourth. It was all one class, right? $60, right? And they did it very nice. The seats were kind of roomy, and the booze flowed pretty easy, and they had little noshy things, and then they had a meal and a movie, and then you slept, and then they had breakfast, and you landed. And it was quite nice. You got in London around not quite noon, but almost. And so it was nice, right? And there were things like that all over the place. That if you weren't stuck in fear or in being a troglodyte, you could and that's, like I say, this window of opportunity. When things like this happen, that's really when opportunities open up. And the folks who the video I played of Cliff, telling us that it's a weaponized biological weapon. Whatever it is, who knows? But how he describes how people look at things, you should go back and watch that video, because he has this thing where people who are stuck in their belief structures, like the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, the people who are really going to suffer from this is the Chinese Communist Party. This is their end. And China is no longer going to be the manufacturer of stuff. They can't do it, period. Their whole infrastructure is just going to collapse, right? And this is going to bring on the robotized thing of manufacturing. And again, that too is ancient technology, right? When we already we have, when the guy who did Star Trek, where they had the replicator. We've had that technology since Nikola Tesla in the 1890s. Matter is made from energy equals mc squared, right? And you can do the same thing. Matter equals energy times the speed of light squared. Divided. And so we can, and that's what a 3D printer is, right? But it's doing it the long way around, by squirting plastic into a, no, it's energy that does all of this. And that's what the real thing holding back the real virus is, the greed. When Tesla developed this technology in the 1890s to set human race free, Mr. Morgan said, sorry, Nick, we're not going to do it because we can't make money at this. Setting humanity free isn't a profit thing. So we have to, and it's not, the Marxist, socialist, communist motif. No, because those guys, here we have a capitalist state. In the socialist countries, they have state capitalism. No, the whole thing of holding individuals as slaves to manufacturing is a real, that's the issue. That's the problem. That's the thing that has to be dealt with. And we have the technology to do it. It's just the aesthetic problem, the giving up of greed. I mean, Mr. Bezos of Amazon, he's not, I have a friend of mine who has a business, and he went out and spent lots of money to get masks for his workers, right? Because they deal with people. So, he did that. He didn't charge them anything, and he's making sure that their health insurance will stay paid, even if the business goes. He's taking his money to make sure if they get sick, they don't have to pay for it. He's keeping their insurance alive. Well, those 10 million people who just lost their job because they have to stay in their house, they've lost their health care. And on the average, big pharma / industrialized hospitals for profit are charging everyone who gets this COVID thing $30,000 a pop, right? Even if you die. And why the bodies are lining up? I mean, there are 1.5 million people who die on the planet every day, right? And, we take care of their bodies, we bury them, we, incinerate them, we do whatever we do culturally. But because this thing's a pandemic, those bodies are considered toxic waste. So we can't just have some guy roll them down to the morgue and then send them off to the cemetery. No, they got to be gotten rid of, like hazardous waste. So that's why they're putting them in freezer trucks, right? Because they can't just get rid of them normally. I mean, all of these things are pretty much right in front of our face. If we go look at it, it's not because so many people are dying. No, it's because those bodies have to be dealt with in a different way. And so no one is thinking outside the box. And that's why I saw the guy who is the general who got a hold of when Katrina happened in New Orleans, right? Things were catastrophic, FEMA, all those people, until they, put this black general in charge, and he straightened it all out, right? And so he was being interviewed, and he said, what's his name? Donald's son-in-law is a total pinhead, and he says the Army has a way of doing it, and you don't have to have martial law. You just have to use. He said we didn't have martial law in New Orleans, but we used the laws that were written for FEMA for catastrophes like this, and this is a catastrophe like a terrible storm. And he said this, but they're not doing anything that they should be doing. And he said it goes straight to, the guys at the top, the guys in the White House, and Donnie's using his daily, COVID-19, breaking news as a tool for his reelection, right? And he's getting into petty arguments with when the news people ask him a question about his incompetence, and we're taking care, we're doing great things, Well, they're not testing anybody. They're not, and the testing is irrelevant. They're not getting people masks, right? They're not taking care of the people on the front lines. I have friends who are doctors in New York, and they basically say that it's the protocols that are the problem, and that there is no set protocol. Everyone's making it up as they're going along. They said there have been other infectious diseases that hit New York, and they had protocols and it worked very nicely. It's just that everything is so confused, nothing is ever set, and things come down from up high. It's and politics. Governor Cuomo, he's playing this just like Donnie is, because what he's playing for is that he does his own daily from the governor's seat, and he wants to be the next president. So he's showing that how competent he is, and how empathetic he is, and how and he knows that Biden and Bernie are just forget about it, right? So neither of them are going to have enough votes to get the nomination outright, and so it's going to be contested. And in the back room, where no one's talking to each other, who's going to come out as the president? But Governor Cuomo, right? At least that's what he's hoping for. And they're all doing this. Agoraphobics, right? Agoraphobics, yeah. But that's not how humans are, and that's why they're getting testy and mean, and because they're in their own little closets and can't get out. They're like, rats in a maze. And me, I just walk outside and talk to the squirrels. I watch little buds, grow, right? And I feel, God's love. God goes with me wherever I go. And that's what's missing in this whole equation here, is God's unconditional love. People are so stuck into, oh, I'm going to lose all my stuff, and they are separated. The separated ones have invented many cures for what they believe to be the ills of the world. Well, the way God set up our immune systems, the things that's killing us, what causes, what is the word dis-ease, right? It's two Latin roots, dis meaning not, it's being disrupted, ease, and when our body is at ease, homeostasis, that's when it's healthy. When it's stressed out, when the cortisol level's up and your adrenaline's pumping, you got fight or flight, you're not doing too good, right? And that's what the American population is being, of course they're going to die. They're being stressed out, right? And the thing that, and when I, that's why I always use the term love's co-creation, right? Because God, everyone owns God. God is a trademarked thing. Every religion, God's on our side, So but God is our Father and our Mother. That is the whole thing about what it's about. It's about, men and women. That is God. That is the co-creation. And when we separate ourselves, into, these tribal entities of gender and sex and economics and belief structures, please. But the one thing they do not do, that means the folks who separate themselves, is to question the reality of the problem. Right. That's what no one is questioning. The reality of this problem. What is the problem? No one's, Cliff is a little off the hook, but at least he's thinking outside the box, right? At least he's not coming from a belief structure. But pretty much everyone does, even if they're not, they are. J.P. Morgan, classic Al quote. uh, yeah, media, this thing, you want to talk about separation? This little gizmo right here, this is the, social media. It's not social at all. It's a vehicle to separate you, right? Put you in a box. You put you in this box, put you right there. That's where it is. Now it's a handy tool. As a tool, not bad, You can look stuff up, see what's going on, blah, 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 right away. But to use it as a vehicle to separate you, instead of going down to the pub and having one with your friends. Ugh. So, been doing this for an hour here. I'm a little tired. Deep within us is everything that is perfect. Everything that is perfect is in us when we are in homeostasis, when we are at ease, when we let God's love permeate us. That's what animates. Otherwise, this is just a bag of water with some, funky trace elements. That's all it is. What makes it my avatar is love's co-creation. What time is it? No, it's gotten later than I thought. I started later. Uh, you can severe suffer because a source of all your joy goes out the window when God is not with you. And that's why I call it love's co-creation. God is love, right? And without that love, right, and all of that which is our cultural base, So I'm a shamanic, psychosocial, cultural, forensic, anthropologic, alchemist. I want to say historian, but I'm not. There's something else in there that comes next. But all of that stuff is love's co-creation. That's why they're connected. And when when I was, an itinerant scholar for 30 years, and I was in all these different universities, most was that all these people fighting for tenure they were in their little box. They were, when I would tell people I'm a shamanic, psychosocial, cultural, forensic, anthropologic alchemist, say, what the frack? And the old guys who were in charge of things, would chuckle and go, Al's right. Because to understand sociology, you got to understand psychology, you got to understand anthropology, you got to understand, So that's where I look at it. And I start shamanically and I stop magic. Shamanically is indigenous social framing, right? That's when we put ourselves together with all our relations. That's shamanic. and Scholastic say, "Well, you're a witch doctor." It's like, please. We're as deep as can get into entertainment. No, but the real deal is that it's not the crap on this is not even entertaining. You know, and again, that's the great opportunity. Everyone's stuck in their house now. Binging on you know social media and stuff on all the different platforms, and they see how boring and stupid it is. One thing to watch a show and wait all week for it to come, and then you're kind of woo. But if you can you're stuck in your house watching that shit over and over and over, you realize what a wasteland it is, right? And most of these YouTube channels are the same thing. And that's why I try to. I'm going to fall asleep in front of you. Okay. I think I have to, unless you guys pick up the chat a little bit more. Because I really am about to fall asleep here. And I love my sleep. That's the beauty of being out in the middle of nowhere. There is no sound, no light, no electronic. I mean, there's an electronic buzz, but it's 1/100th of what it is. But, there's a 980 line that's about 2 miles from me. Now, if it was any closer, I'd be, but I mean, even though I'm out in the middle of nowhere, there's a freaking high voltage, big towers about, 2 miles just over there. So, and I can feel it, and that's the thing about being an empath, pet, you can feel everything, which is good, and I've been trained to be able to shield myself and not be overly affected by it. But anyway, okay, I'll say a little prayer before I go. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. It was in the beginning, is now, ever shall be, world without men. And in every day and every way we take the peace of the earth, and we make it stronger with love's co-creation. And bless us indeed, enlarge our territory, put your hand upon our shoulder, and keep us from evil, so we will do no harm. And Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for our sinners, now in the hour of our death. Amen. As it was in the beginning, is now, ever shall be, world without. Amen. And Mother, hear us. Help us take Father Sky's prana and ground it through our bodies, through your chi. Amen. Oh, look at that. Perfect. 1 hour, 10 minutes, 10 seconds. Let's see, where are you guys talking about here? I feel life peaked. Can't even tell just how much I would have loved to be born in 1900. There's a great movie called 1900. That would help you. I feel like life peaked then. People were just at their peak. People are always at their peak. It's if you can step up to that peak. Trying to turn people into agoraphobics. Yep, government is saying they aren't having any more cases for the most part. Yep, they've been stripping us our traditional ways for years. Yep. J.P. Morgan. Yep. Deepest can get into entertainment. Yep. Anything else you guys want to say before I say goodnight? I love you all. You stay well. Tomorrow will be Sunday. I will try and do a morning ramble. Did you guys see my this morning ramble? I was going to talk about things, and I started it off, and then with a picture of what the deep green looks like off my little porch here. And then I started, and I got clicked right off, So anyway, I'm going to bed and go into dream time. Anybody want to come and join dream time? Oh, no, there's 6 of you. Anybody want to say anything before I go? I'll stick around if you guys are. Tony and Eden have been having a nice chat here with me, and anyway. So did you guys see the videos I kind of threw up there? I'll do more tomorrow. Like I said, I'm about to fall asleep here, so I'm going to look. It's 1 hour 11 minutes, and Josh Eden says, "Well, like I said, it's a magical night." So everyone meditate. Let's all come together in dream time, okay? And let's see what the magical night does. I love you all.